In the golden haze of the late 1960s, when music echoed through every corner of America and young hearts beat to the rhythm of pop idols, there was one name that seemed to drift through the air like a promise: Bobby Sherman. He wasn't just a singer. He wasn't just an actor. Bobby Sherman was a symbol: the polished smile, the dreamy eyes, the sound of youth captured in vinyl grooves spinning on turntables across the nation. For millions of teenagers, his voice wasn't just music, it was escape, it was hope, it was the belief that life could be as perfect as the songs on the radio. But behind the bright lights, the adoring crowds, and the screaming fans, behind every hit single like Little Woman or Julie, Do You Love Me, hid a truth that fame never tells you at the start. The spotlight doesn't fill the emptiness. Applause doesn't quiet the restless heart. Bobby Sherman had it all, or so it seemed: chart, topping singles, sold-out concerts, his face plastered across magazines, posters pinned to bedroom walls from coast to coast. Young women cried his name. Young men envied his charm. Hollywood opened its gates, casting him in shows like Here Come the Brides, where his character, Jeremy Bolt, brought rugged charm and boyish vulnerability to television screens every week. The world believed Bobby Sherman was living the dream, but dreams, my friend, they change. You see, there comes a moment in every life, often quiet, often ignored, when the cheers grow faint, when the mirror reflects more than just your image. It reflects your soul, your purpose, your deeper calling. For Bobby Sherman, that moment whispered not in sold-out stadiums, but in the quiet hours after the shows, when the music faded, and all that remained was the question that haunts every man, whether idol or unknown: is this all there is? And so began the unraveling of the illusion, not with scandal, not with disgrace, but with the gentle, steady realization that the greatest applause comes not from stages, but from saving lives. But back then, few could have imagined that the poster boy of pop would one day trade microphones for medical bags, would swap television scripts for emergency response manuals, would leave the shimmering stage for the front lines of real human struggle. It's a rare kind of courage to walk away from fame. Rarer still to do it quietly, to choose purpose over popularity, service over celebrity. Yet, Bobby Sherman did just that. This, my friend, is not just a story of a star. It's the story of a man who discovered that the highest stage is the one where you lift others up. And as the lights dimmed on his entertainment career, something brighter began to rise: the quiet, steady glow of service, of second chances, of legacy. But that part of his journey was only just beginning. The world loves to celebrate those who rise to fame, but it rarely understands the ones who choose to leave it behind. Bobby Sherman did both. At the height of his career, he stood at a crossroads that few recognized: a silent, invisible choice between comfort and calling, between the shallow waters of stardom and the deep, uncertain currents of purpose. Most never take that step. They cling to the bright lights, the praise, the illusion. But Bobby, he listened to something greater than applause. And what he heard changed everything. You see, it wasn't sudden. Fame is seductive. It wraps around you, promising meaning. But behind the magazine covers and television shows, behind the autographs and the screaming fans, Bobby began to sense a quiet emptiness. Not the kind that ruins a man overnight, but the kind that eats away slowly, whispering that there's something more, something real. And then life gave him the answer. It started with a chance encounter, witnessing the raw, unfiltered heroism of first responders, the men and women who didn't chase fame, but who ran toward danger, who healed the broken, who saved lives when seconds mattered most. Bobby Sherman had spent years entertaining millions, but in that moment he realized: music lifts the spirit, but service saves the soul. It wasn't easy to walk away. The cameras still called. The record labels still knocked. But deep down, Bobby understood that true greatness isn't measured by charts or ratings. It's measured by impact. So, quietly, courageously, he made the shift. He trained as a paramedic. He learned the tools, the skills, the life-saving procedures. While the world still played his songs on the radio, Bobby was learning how to resuscitate, how to comfort the injured, how to stay calm when chaos roared. And when most stars chased luxury, Bobby chased purpose. His days were no longer filled with scripts and concerts, but with emergency calls, sirens, lives on the line. He didn't do it for headlines. He didn't do it for attention. He did it because inside he knew true success is measured by the people you help stand back up. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't broadcast across the world. But Bobby Sherman's transformation spoke louder than any chart, topping single ever could. And the irony, as he walked away from the fame so many crave, he became something far greater than a teen idol. He became a quiet hero, the kind this world so desperately needs, because life has a way of testing us, of offering choices that reveal our deepest truth. And Bobby's truth was simple: fame fades, applause stops, but compassion, courage, and service, that lasts. The journey was far from over. In fact, what came next would surprise even those who thought they knew him best. The former heartthrob wasn't done changing lives, not by a long shot. Most people remember Bobby Sherman as the smiling young man on TV, the voice that filled teenage bedrooms, the star whose face appeared in every magazine aisle. But they don't remember the uniform. They don't remember the paramedic badge pinned to his chest, or the countless times he knelt beside a stranger, steady hands working to pull someone back from the edge of tragedy. They don't remember because Bobby never asked them to. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It wasn't for cameras or fame. It was real as the pulse of a human heart fighting to survive. You see, when Bobby walked away from the stage, he didn't just step into a new chapter. He stepped into the fire, the chaotic, unpredictable world of emergency response. The world of flashing sirens, critical moments, and impossible decisions. While other stars were posing for photographs, Bobby was learning CPR, mastering medical protocols, carrying trauma kits in the back of ambulances. And when the call came, someone in distress, an accident on the highway, a life hanging in the balance, Bobby Sherman was there. No spotlight, no cheering crowd, just raw human urgency, and a man determined to make a difference. He could have stayed comfortable, retired into the luxury his music career afforded him. But Bobby understood something most overlook. True fulfillment doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being needed. And in those critical moments when a child's life depended on fast action, when an injured stranger looked up with fear in their eyes, Bobby Sherman wasn't a pop idol anymore. He was hope. He was help. He was ready. But the story doesn't end there. As the years passed, his passion for service only grew. He wasn't content to simply respond. He wanted to prevent, to educate, to equip others with the skills that save lives. And so, Bobby joined forces with the Los Angeles Police Department, not as a celebrity guest, but as a certified trainer in first aid and CPR. Day after day, class after class, he taught recruits, officers, everyday citizens, showing them how to act in crisis, how to stay calm when seconds mean everything. This wasn't about applause. It was about responsibility. In 1999, long after the music faded, the LAPD honored Bobby Sherman with the Reserve Officer of the Year award, recognizing his dedication, his quiet leadership, his unwavering commitment to saving lives. Think about that for a moment. A man who once stood under concert lights, now honored not for fame, but for compassion. Most would call that a career change, But for Bobby, it wasn't just a new job. It was a mission, a calling deeper than any song lyric, more meaningful than any trophy. He didn't need the world to notice. He just needed to know that when the moment came, when life hung by a thread, he was ready to pull someone back from the edge. Because at the heart of every hero lies the courage to serve without applause. And Bobby Sherman had that courage in abundance. But his story, his legacy, wasn't finished yet. The world has always celebrated the loud ones, the brightest, the boldest, the ones who never stop reminding you of their success. But Bobby Sherman wasn't one of them. After the stage lights dimmed, after the final curtain call, Bobby didn't chase headlines. He didn't trade on his fame for fortune. He chose a different path, one lined not with red carpets, but with quiet sacrifice, because some heroes work in silence. His journey into public service didn't stop with saving lives in the back of an ambulance. Bobby's heart led him further into the very heart of the community, wearing the uniform of a deputy sheriff in San Bernardino County. It's easy to underestimate what that means. The title sounds simple, but behind every badge lies a promise to protect, to serve, to face the worst moments society offers, and still stand tall. Bobby Sherman made that promise. While the world remembered him as the boyish heartthrob from Here Come the Brides, Bobby traded television scripts for police training manuals. He wasn't acting anymore. This was real streets. Real danger, real people relying on him when it mattered most. Day after day, he patrolled communities not for applause, but to ensure families felt safe, to offer help when chaos erupted, to be present, steady, reliable the way a true servant, leader should be. He never needed recognition, but those who worked beside him knew beneath the uniform, behind the famous face, stood a man defined not by fame, but by humility. You see, some people spend their entire lives chasing validation, measuring worth by followers, likes, fleeting praise. Bobby understood something deeper. Your greatest legacy isn't measured by what the world sees, but by the lives you quietly lift when no one's watching. And lift lives he did. But Bobby's compassion didn't stop with the streets of California. His heart stretched across oceans to the children of Ghana, West Africa, a place where opportunity is scarce, where education can mean the difference between hope and hopelessness. Together with his wife, Bridget Paublon, Bobby founded the Bridget and Bobby Sherman Children's Foundation, an organization built not for profit, but for purpose. Their mission, simple, yet profound, to provide education, music programs, and leadership development to young minds often overlooked by the world. Because Bobby knew he couldn't change the whole world overnight, but if he could empower just one child, spark hope in one heart, ignite courage in one soul, it would be enough. Imagine that for a moment. A man who once stood beneath blinding stage lights, now building classrooms in distant lands. A man whose voice once filled radio waves, now lifting young voices who never dreamed they could rise. This wasn't about legacy in the public eye. It was about quiet, lasting impact. Bobby Sherman understood that real success, the kind that echoes beyond headlines, lives in the hearts you inspire, the futures you protect, the kindness you plant in places others forget. His fame may have faded from the magazines, but his purpose burned brighter than ever. And as his story continued, Bobby showed the world that walking away from stardom wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of becoming something far greater. The greatest measure of a man is not found in the songs he sings or the awards he holds. It's found in the quiet echoes of the lives he changes, lives that ripple outward, touching places he may never see. And Bobby Sherman understood that truth better than most. For every concert he performed, for every fan whose walls once displayed his face, There now stood another story, a story of a child with an education, a family with hope, a life saved because Bobby chose service over celebrity. His foundation in Ghana was more than charity, it was a reflection of his deepest belief that every child, no matter where they're born, deserves the chance to dream. Imagine that. A boy from California, once the darling of America's music scene, now building opportunities for children thousands of miles away. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about futures, and yet, Bobby never boasted. He never demanded headlines. His work, his impact, quietly grew like seeds planted in fertile soil, destined to bloom long after the world forgot the records and TV shows. But the ripples didn't stop there. Back home, his decades of service as a paramedic, a first aid trainer, and a deputy sheriff created their own quiet waves unseen by the public, but felt in the hearts of those he helped. There's a story, whispered among the officers he trained, among the families he comforted. They say Bobby had a way of making the impossible seem bearable, that in the chaos of a crisis, when sirens screamed and hearts pounded, his presence brought calm. His hands brought healing. Think about that. A man whose voice once filled stadiums, now filling hospital rooms with hope. A man whose face once graced glossy magazines, now kneeling beside the injured, steady, focused, present. Most would have clung to the spotlight, milked every moment of fame for fortune. But Bobby Sherman chose something else, something far rarer in this world. He chose to matter when no one was watching. And isn't that the true mark of greatness? Not the applause, but the impact, not the fame, but the quiet legacy left behind. Because life, my friend, isn't about how loudly the world remembers your name. It's about the silent ripples your kindness creates, the stranger you help, the child you uplift, the community you strengthen. Long after the cameras fade, and Bobby's ripples, they stretched far. Across continents, in classrooms, in emergency rooms, in the hearts of the forgotten, his life touched thousands, perhaps millions, and yet he remained humble, steady, grounded, because he knew. Fame is fleeting, but the difference you make, that echoes forever. But even as Bobby's journey unfolded with grace and service, life, as it often does, had one final, unexpected chapter in store, a chapter that would test his spirit and remind us all that even the strongest must face the shadows, and in those shadows, true courage is revealed. Every life, no matter how noble, how inspiring, how full of purpose, must one day face its greatest test. For Bobby Sherman, that test came quietly, without warning, wrapped in the uncertainty of illness, the kind that humbles even the strongest, the kind that reminds us we are all human. In the spring of 2025, as the world slowly began to remember the quiet hero he had become, Bobby received news that would shake even the most steadfast soul. Stage 4 kidney cancer, a diagnosis that many would meet with fear, despair, or bitterness, but not Bobby. The same strength that carried him through the dazzling highs of fame, the same resolve that guided him through the chaos of emergency rooms and patrol cars, now became his anchor. He faced his illness the way he had faced every challenge before, with courage, humility, and unwavering grace. He didn't seek sympathy. He didn't retreat into sorrow. Instead, Bobby embraced his final chapter with the same quiet dignity that had defined his entire life. He spent those last precious months surrounded by those who mattered most: his wife, Bridget, his family, the countless friends and colleagues who admired not the star, but the man beneath the fame. They say facing mortality reveals a person's true character, and Bobby's character never wavered. Even in the face of pain, even as his body weakened, his spirit remained strong, reminding those around him that life is not measured in years, but in impact. His story didn't end with chart-topping hits. It didn't end with applause. It ended the way all great stories do, with love, with quiet reflection. with the understanding that the most powerful legacies are often the simplest. On June 24, 2025, Bobby Sherman left this world peacefully, hand in hand with his wife, surrounded by love. There were no flashing cameras, no final concerts, just the soft, undeniable presence of a life well lived, and a legacy that would ripple far beyond his final breath. And while the world mourned the passing of a teen idol, those who knew him best mourned something far greater, the loss of a man who traded fame for purpose, applause for service, and celebrity for compassion. But in truth, Bobby wasn't gone, because a life like his never truly fades. It lives in the lives he saved, the children he educated, the communities he protected, the hearts he inspired. His songs may have once filled radio waves, but his greatest music was the quiet, steady rhythm of a life dedicated to others. And in that music, in that rhythm, Bobby Sherman still echoes. His courage reminds us that life is more than bright lights and fleeting praise. His compassion proves that greatness comes not from being seen, but from seeing others. And his legacy teaches that even in the shadows of illness, even in the face of life's greatest test, the human spirit can still rise, still shine, still inspire. But perhaps his story holds one final lesson yet to be told, because even in passing, Bobby Sherman's legacy was only just beginning. There's a strange thing about legacies. They never truly follow the rules of time. Fame fades, records gather dust, faces disappear from magazine covers. But the quiet deeds, the lives touched, the compassion planted like seeds in forgotten corners of the world, those refuse to fade. And Bobby Sherman's legacy is one of those. Long after the screaming crowds grew silent, long after the bright lights dimmed, Bobby's story found new life, not in headlines, but in whispers, in quiet moments of gratitude, in the hearts of those forever changed by his quiet heroism. Look closely and you'll see his legacy everywhere. You'll find it in the emergency rooms of Los Angeles, where officers, paramedics, and first responders, once trained by Bobby himself, continue saving lives every single day. Every chest compressed, every life pulled back from the brink, echoes of Bobby's steady, patient teaching. You'll see it across oceans, in the classrooms of Ghana, where children, many forgotten by the world, now sit with heads held high, learning, dreaming, building futures once thought impossible. All because one man believed that fame is fleeting, but hope that lasts. His foundation still thriving, still nurturing young minds, still reminding the world that even the smallest acts of kindness ripple further than we ever imagine. But perhaps the most powerful part of Bobby Sherman's legacy lies not in grand gestures, but in quiet inspiration. It lives in the man watching this story, wondering if it's too late to change. It lives in the woman who thinks her past defines her future, and realizes it doesn't. It lives in the everyday people, the ones without spotlights, without applause, who realize that greatness, real, enduring greatness, comes not from being known, but from knowing when to serve. Bobby Sherman didn't need the world to remember his name. He needed the world to remember his message, that you can rise to fame and still walk away with grace, that you can rewrite your story at any moment. That service, sacrifice, and quiet compassion will always echo longer than fame, and so his music lives on, not just in old records, but in the rhythm of every life saved, every child uplifted, every soul reminded that it's never too late to choose purpose. Even now, as his voice drifts softly from vintage radios, as his image flickers in black and white television reruns, Bobby's truest legacy plays out in every classroom his foundation builds, in every emergency call answered by those he trained, in every heart stirred by his journey from celebrity to servant, because in the end, Bobby Sherman showed us the way, a way beyond the illusions of fame, way beyond the shallow chase for applause, a way into the deep, steady waters of real human purpose. And in that purpose, he became more than a pop star. He became a reminder that one life, when lived with courage and compassion, can ripple across generations, and those ripples, they never stop. The story of Bobby Sherman is not just a story of fame, it's a story of choices, a story of a young man who once stood beneath blinding lights, adored by millions, whose songs filled stadiums, whose smile sold magazines, and who still had the courage to walk away. Most people never do. They cling to the attention, to the applause, to the hollow promises of celebrity. But Bobby Sherman understood something far greater than fame. It's not how the world sees you that defines your worth. It's how you choose to see the world, and Bobby chose to see a world that needed healing, a world that needed hope, a world that needed people willing to trade comfort for courage. From the stages of Hollywood, to the back of ambulances, to the classrooms of distant lands, Bobby's life was proof that reinvention isn't just possible, it's necessary. Think about it. How many of us are stuck chasing things that don't fulfill us? How many wake up every morning wrapped in the illusion of success, but quietly haunted by the feeling that there must be more? Bobby Sherman answered that question not with words, but with action. He traded microphones for medical kits. He swapped scripts for CPR manuals. He exchanged applause for the quiet, unseen impact of saving lives. And in doing so, he revealed a truth most never learn. Purpose is louder than fame. His legacy stretches beyond his passing. The officers he trained still carry his lessons in their hands. The children his foundation uplifts still carry his belief in their hearts. The fans, old and new, still carry his story, not of a teen idol frozen in time, but of a man who evolved, who gave, who quietly proved that life is not about standing in the spotlight. It's about standing for something. And now his story becomes a mirror for you. Ask yourself, are you living for applause or for impact? Are you chasing recognition or building a legacy? Because the truth is, greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the courage to change. It whispers in the willingness to serve. It whispers in the quiet decision to lift others when the world isn't watching. Bobby Sherman heard that whisper, and he answered, and though the final page of his life has been written, his story, it's still being told in every life he touched, every soul he inspired, every act of compassion that carries his echo. And now, perhaps that story continues with you, because one life, lived with courage, can change everything. One life, just like yours. The music fades, the lights dim, but legacy endures. And Bobby Sherman's, it's only just begun.